Spider-Man is not just Marvel's biggest character, but probably the most beloved superhero in the world, with probably the best costume design for a superhero ever made. And over the years, we've had the pleasure of having a good amount of live-action interpretations of the character that is almost entirely cinematic. Because of this, Spider-Man has basically only ever had big budgets given to their projects, and in turn, costume design. And as such has had a pretty fantastic on-screen costume history that has given us multiple incredible live-action adaptations of the Spider-Man costume. These costumes do, however, range in quality, so in this video, I'll be going over every live-action adaptation of the Spider-Man costume and rank them from worst to best, which as a ranking should remain relevant until at the very least Spider-Man 4, which will probably release in 2025. Now, there have been many of what you might call Spider-Man suits, so for the sake of simplification, I will only be counting any legitimate attempt at either an adaptation of the Spider-Man suit or maybe a reinvention. What this means is that the prototype suits worn by Tobey and Andrew will not be included, although Holland's prototype suit will be, because it has the correct color scheme and it was worn quite a bit. On top of that, any of the black suits will be excluded as well, and if you were wondering my ranking of these suits, it would probably be first the Far From Home stealth suit, followed by the No Way Home Inside Out suit, followed by far the best of the three, the Spider-Man symbiote suit, which I might like just a bit more than the typical Raimi suit. However, a black suit, even though these aren't all based off of the actual symbiote suit from the comics, would never be on the top of a Spider-Man costume ranking for me personally, because it doesn't touch the red and blue classic design. With all those suits out of the way, we're left with 12 costumes. So I will mention that I do personally think that suits have generally gotten better over time, and the list will be indicative of that, without consideration for how good it was for the time, although I will be more lenient in the commentary, which is more so relevant for the suits from the 70s. Remember, this is only my opinion. Make sure to subscribe, and let's begin. As previously mentioned, I do think suits have generally gotten better over time, and no more is that more evident than in the two Spider-Man shows of the 1970s, with the American one ironically giving us the slightly worse costume of the two. The eyes being automotive was the standard until the MCU came along, so it won't be a negative for the pre-MCU suits, but it will be a positive for the MCU ones, which might boost them a bit. However, this suit probably has the worst looking and least Spider-Man looking eyes of any live-action design, on an obviously very cheap looking suit that nowadays wouldn't even pass as a good cosplay, more like a Halloween costume with a very cartoony looking logo that's maybe even a bit off the center. I said I'd be more lenient on the old suits in the commentary, but I don't think this was even good for the time, because literally just a year later, Japan did it better. Over in Japan, a Spider-Man TV show that doesn't actually star Peter Parker made a very different Spider-Man with a bit of an improved and more accurate to the comics costume, and by the way, this is the only character in the entirety of the list that isn't Peter Parker, but the costume is close enough to Spider-Man that we're counting it. The shade of blue is really nice, the eyes are far better than the American version, although that's not really saying much, and the eyes still do look worse than any subsequent suit. The suit is still obviously very cheap looking and looks like a modern day Halloween costume with a cartoony logo, and maybe a bit too orange shade of red. However, it is still at least better than the American version from around the same time. My opinion on the MCU Iron Spider suit has gotten lower and lower over the years, from kind of loving it to now kind of disliking it, as I recall being very excited to see the suit in action in Infinity War, with the trailers carefully choosing the best shot to use, and yeah, it does look great in its debut shot, with a really nice looking design that changes the Iron Spider suit to be more spider than iron as opposed to the comics, with a really nice glowing and even emotive eyes. However, the suit is fully CGI 100% of the time, which was a huge unforeseen detriment, as a lot of the time the suit kind of looks awkward on Tom Holland, with even the design making the chin blend into the neck, which just looks weird. But even regardless of that, the CGI isn't always up to par for some reason, even though the budgets on these movies are huge. Additionally, looking back, the blue on the suit has always been far too dark, the metallic material just doesn't look as good as a fabric, and the logo, while nice looking, is a bit too overbearing and large. It's a shame that I came to dislike this suit, because it it appeared in every Spider-Man MCU appearance after Civil War. On the flip side of the Iron Spider suit, I think I've come to appreciate the MCU homemade suit more and more over the years, as it's a really charming homemade suit that definitely looks like something that Peter could have made on his own, has a surprisingly good looking shade of red and blue, and even emotive eyes, although they don't really look the most Spider-Man-like. That is on purpose. This suit really could have only been so high on the list, however, with the purposefully cheap looking thrown together design that looks less like the typical Spider-Man and more like a color inverted Scarlet Spider, and I did consider not including it on the list. Still, it is wild to me how much I loved the Iron Spider suit initially, but now all these years later I like it less than this cheap, even less traditional Spider-Man suit because it's genuinely really charming, and I think it's really cool that it's what he wore in the climax of Spider-Man Homecoming. In a slightly different suit to what he'd get a little bit later, the first on-screen Spider-Man suit was pretty fantastic for the time, far better than any other superhero suit of the era. I mean, just compare it to the X-Men, which came out like 2 years prior. But the suit has definitely been improved on since, even with the same trilogy. What was great about the suit was its really great design using raised webbing and a really nice looking and very unique sharp eyes, with a fantastic fabric on a suit that perfectly shows off Tobey Maguire's physique, while remaining not too overbearing. The logo looks great and is well placed on the suit, but it is a bit smaller and less prominent than the second Raimi suit, which isn't as good, and we'll get to that later. Additionally, the suit seems to be a bit limiting to the actor's movement, and the shade of red is maybe a bit too orange. It's definitely a great suit, but it's been improved on many times. Specifically 7 times. This is probably a bit of nostalgia talking, but it seems like I do like the Amazing Spider-Man suit a lot more than most people. I just think it's an incredibly unique design that reinvents the Spider-Man suit into something just far more gritty. The shade of blue I love, it's pretty much perfect, and it complements the pretty great shade of red as well. The minimally raised webbing is really nice, and while the logo doesn't pop much, it's a really unique take on the logo, which covers the entire red portion of the torso. The eyes being yellow doesn't look great, and the suit maybe could have used a red belt design to break up more of the blue, and it's certainly the least comic accurate of the typical red and blue suits, but I just really like it as a reinvention of the Spider-Man suit. Still, however, it doesn't make it into even the top 5. Of the 4 cloth-based typical Spider-Man suit designs that Holland wore, the Far From Home one, otherwise known as the upgraded suit by the PlayStation 4 game, is definitely my least favorite from the simple fact that it's just not the ideal color scheme, and although the red looks great, the suit has absolutely zero blue, which does look good, but less than ideal for Spider-Man. The suit does have a really nice looking fabric that looks comfortable and showcases the perfect amount of physique, and a suit that does really well pull off being a black variant of the Homecoming suit, with a bit more of a minimal design compared to that one that does look great, with a white bordered, slightly larger logo that might just pop more than the Homecoming one. Additionally, the MCU suits basically all get points for having emotive eyes, which does go a long way in making Spider-Man feel more like Spider-Man. The integrated suit from No Way Home has all the positives and negatives of the previous suit, including a really nice fabric, shade of red, and emotive eyes, while again not being the ideal color scheme, even if it does look nice. But if you're not already going to be the ideal color scheme, you might as well go all out on a suit that combines the upgraded suit with the Iron Spider suit, which together makes for a better suit than both, as it's more interesting than the upgraded suit and pulls off the Iron Spider style larger logo design far better on a suit that also does feel like a really cool final suit of the Home trilogy, as it kind of has elements of everything, and the fabric just looks so much better than the metallic Iron Spider suit. So yes, it is better than both of them. However, I do understand people who were a bit disappointed that he was wearing this when he was teaming up with Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and not maybe his Homecoming suit, or maybe, well, what came later. The second Raimi suit pretty much fixes the main issues of the first suit with a far nicer shade of red and a far better looking and more prominent logo that definitely complements the suit more. I'd say the suit itself is probably still a bit limiting to the actor, but they are able to circumvent that more easily with CGI. And also the eyes aren't emotive, which again isn't a negative, but it does make it a little bit lesser than the MCU suits. This suit obviously has all the positives of the original Raimi suit, such as a really nice looking raised webbing, really nice looking sharp eyes that are also very unique, fantastic fabric, and a suit that shows off Tobey Maguire's physique. I completely understand why this would be your favorite Spider-Man suit, as it holds up very well despite debuting in 2004, but in my opinion, there are 3 suits that aren't just better, but far better, like a tier above. After the first Amazing Spider-Man suit took a completely different approach and reinvented the Spider-Man design, the sequel returned to something a lot more familiar, with a suit that is very similar to the Raimi suits, but is arguably better than any of them. The raised webs still look great, the shades of red and blue are perfect, and the big eyes especially look incredible. I don't think any mask has ever been more Spider-Man than this one. The long logo looks great and certainly pops more than the first Andrew suit, but I will say, it might be a bit too low on the torso. Still, the suit is fantastic, and if the eyes were emotive, it might have been number 2, but since they're static, I'd give the next suit 1 up on it. However, even regardless of that, it is pretty close between the two. As good as the other two Spider-Man have looked, I think Tom Holland is, in my opinion, the best looking Spider-Man and became so in his very first appearance. The Stark suit, as it's called in the PS4 game, is such a great adaptation of the classic Spider-Man suit, with a bit of changes such as the black lines and bands throughout the design, which looks great and gives this version of Spider-Man a bit of a unique identity, in a suit that does, yes, have high-tech Stark elements to it, but is still, at its core, very much so Spider-Man. The color scheme and the shades of red, and especially the blue, are fantastic. I just love this light shade of blue. The fabric is pretty much perfect and looks comfortable. The small logo is really charming, and of course, the emotive eyes go a very long way, especially since this was the first suit to do it. I've always liked this suit, but I've kind of just liked it more and more over the years, as upon rewatches, I legitimately can't help feeling disappointed when he wears anything but this in the Home Trilogy or Avengers movies. They, I think, really peaked early with the MCU Spider-Man design, or rather, that would be the case if not for one single scene at the end of Spider-Man No Way Home. I would definitely need to see more of it, hopefully throughout the entirety of not just a Spider-Man 4, but maybe even an entire second trilogy if he's not wearing the black suit. But I think the final swing suit from No Way Home isn't just my favorite live-action adaptation of a Spider-Man suit, but maybe my favorite live-action adaptation of a superhero suit ever made. It's incredible. I remember seeing the final suit of No Way Home for the first time and being blown away by how good this suit looks. It's a perfect adaptation of the classic Spider-Man design with minimal changes that might just improve on it, specifically with the shade of blue and its shininess, which looks incredible and really complements the red. The logo looks great as some sort of combination of the 3 live-action Spider-Man logos. The nice-looking fabric strikes a perfect balance between the very Spider-Man-like, cheaper homemade quality to it, while also looking incredible and probably the most comic-accurate Spider-Man suit ever made. The only complaint I might have is that according to the official art, the logo has a gold tint to it, which isn't ideal, but you can't ever really tell on screen, and with the perfect design, the incredible color scheme that might just improve on the already perfect Spider-Man design, and also, of course, the emotive eyes, which the MCU has done so well, this is not just my favorite live-action Spider-Man suit, but probably my favorite live-action design of a comic book suit ever made.